Hello.
Hello, welcome to the Dance of the Soul. And Regan Forston and I, Natasha Venter, are here to help you. Um, we love to bring the consciousness of life to bring it up to be who you can be your better self. Because the Dance of the Soul, it's the story of who we are, with doing the dance. How do we dance through life? How do we negotiate life? And with that, Regan and Regan's a hypnotherapist, clinical hypnotherapist, and he does this with love and kindness. Great. I mean, he's got a lot of history, he has a lot of knowings. I am a multi life intuitive. I've been intuitive, I don't know how many different lifetimes. I can't even count them. There's so many. And then I do energy work, seer, whatever you want to call it. I'm multifaceted. I just want to help you be who you are. So I love to work with past lives, DNA work. I also love to help clear houses and do that kind of thing. So it's a negotiation of how do we work with our full facet of who we are, and because it's multi-layered. And right now we're going through a lot of people coming into their truths, people trying to figure out who they are. We come into somebody's place of where they're at. Like, let's say we walk by somebody in a grocery store and their energy feels off to us, but we don't know how to label that. And so sometimes we kind of go into disheartedness or disconnectedness, or we go into judgment real easy, or we go into this kind of other story. And how do we negotiate that? So Regan and I wanted to talk about, going into this, because right now, we're in the summer months in the north side of the hemisphere, and people in the southern hemisphere going into the winter months. And it's all in how does it look to us, but it's the planets are the same. What's happening in the north, when a planet goes into retrograde, it's in the north and the south. When a planet goes in, when we have, something happening, it's north south. So it's a whole world that we need to work on and look at. And there's a lot of things we don't like, and that's why we added in the thing. There's people we don't like to be around, and then there's things we don't want to deal with and like to be around. And so how can we negotiate going through those things and that moment when you struggle with that? So, hi, Regan. You had an
Right.
amazing weekend. I had an amazing weekend. I was in a fair for 2 days,
Oh,
and
wow.
two 12-hour days by the time I got done with my day-to-day stuff. And I got the confirmation from many people that I really helped them a lot.
That's
And
good.
then,
Was this like a psychic fair or
yeah, it was, and it was a newer one in a smaller town, but yet it was very prosperous and very
yeah,
wonderful. And met up with this wonderful person who he was like, "Oh my gosh, Natasha, oh my god, oh, you can do that, you can do this, you can do that. Oh wow, and you do it that easily." And I mean, it was just like, he was honoring, he was seeing me, witnessing all that I can do, and it's like, yeah, he goes, you need to be a little more fiery about what you do, because you're pretty passive about it.
yeah. A lot of presidents, secretly, as we found out, have uh, seeked out mediums to help them.
Hmm.
I know President Reagan, I mean, he was very Christian or whatever, but they had a famous medium. I don't remember who she was, but they would try to get the perspective from a medium standpoint. So nowadays it's being more accepted, than it was. But it's funny how it used to still. I mean, well, even like back in history, so many of the kings and that they had seers. They would ask them when's the best time to plant, when's the best time to go. So they've been, people have had this ability, have been behind the scenes for millennia now.
Hmm.
And now it's nice that it can be more out in the open, and more accepted.
Exactly. And that's my goal. And so in you're doing tremendous work in your hypnotherapy, bringing awarenesses of the other worlds around us.
Mhm.
And why are we doing this personal walk in life? And many times when we get into this personal walk in life, we come up against things we don't like, because that's called the shadow work. That's called, let's look at the other side of the mirror. Let's look at the other side of the coin. Let's look at the other side of life, and see what's going on, because there's a lot of actions that are going on that we don't like what's happening. And so how do you negotiate that? How do you be? So let's kind of look at, if we can,
So the
Regan.
like, the topic then today is like, how how do we deal with things that we hate to do we have to deal with, difficult people, difficult situations, things that make us wanna, or things that make us wanna cuss or, or blame somebody or whatever, We all have those things. So, what are some good ways, to deal with it and why? We wanna give you some perspective today of maybe why you're having to go through these things,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, exactly. And for one, how do we discern? That word has really been coming out of my mouth a lot lately. That
Mhm.
discern. How do we discern between um something that is there to push our buttons for our greater good and something we just plain old don't like? And then whose truth is that? I don't like it.
Yeah.
Because right now we're coming up on a lot of personal truths that aren't really sitting right with us. And sometimes we come up with something that we don't like. And, oh, that was my grandparents' truth that I shouldn't like that. But I just kind of, I'm not really sure if I dislike it. Like the thing about spiders, being scared of spiders can be 3 generations. Well, I don't
Mhm.
have to dislike spiders. I kind of like spiders, but
Well, that's where,
there's a part
a
of me
lot
that
of our,
says I should hate spiders, you
yeah,
know?
a lot of our fears and that come from the fears of our parents who, like when you were young and they'd see a spider and we'd see them freaking out and and screaming and whatever it was. And so that's how we're taught to be afraid of them.
Mhm.
So sometimes as an adult, it's difficult. I had a session earlier today where I had to help a person get over something like that. She didn't know about the tapping, the EFT and the havening touch and everything. Um, and so I just mentioned it to her, and we sidetracked the life between life session, ended up being a regular therapy session to help her to get over some things. And it worked like, man, she was a 7 on one issue, is like a 7, like
Mhm.
scale of 1 to 10, and we ended up getting it down to about a 2. So she could say, wow, I could really feel the relief from that. Like I can still think of that fear I usually have, of that being in that situation where a minute ago when I thought of it, I was a 7, and now it only feels like a 2. And I said, well, that's the way this energy medicine works, and it'll stay there. It's not going to go back again, that way. So, um, you know, I guess a lot of times these things we come up against, they show us, reveal to us what our fears are,
Mhm.
right? And then if we can, we try to just not look at it, or we try to sweep it under the rug or something, but it keeps coming back, and it can really uh, make life difficult. So the good news is that there's ways now of dealing with those things. But why, Natasha, if someone says, is going through a difficult time and you're counseling them or something, and they really are open to listening to what the truth is, a lot of times, sometimes it's hard to hear the truth. But basically, why do you think we have to go through so many trials? Why can't life just be easy and breezy every day, and us not have to go through difficult situations?
Well, it's kind of like strengthening a muscle. You almost have to have resistance when you're strengthening a muscle. You pull forward, it's like you have resistance. And when you have resistance, you gain strength. Well, when you have resistance in something that is in our world, it brings it through the next layer. Like this weekend, well, in the last week, I had to stand up to what was representation of a bully. I'm not going to call the person a bully, but it was a representation of a bully because it brought out those emotions in me.
Yeah.
So she may not have been a bully, but it brought out those
Oh,
feelings
yeah.
in me.
Wow, that's interesting.
So with that I was standing up to the bully inside of me, and she was the representation of of that moment. So me even just having a voice, speaking to the situation, calling that part of me that really needed to be talking to the person who represented the power. Now I'm going to bring it down from a bully to a power, right?
Hmm.
And so I was talking with them, and and with that, then there was a little bit of a negotiation, because when you have a perception of something and it's a strong line, we don't really necessarily learn it. So with that, then me learning, me me going up against that representation of the bully scenario. Do you see how I keep changing it? That it's not necessarily
Mhm.
the person, it's a scenario that I really brought my inner child up that was bullied all those years. My dyslexic part of me, I brought up a weak, I'm just gonna call it a weak voice that I have, that is representation in that mix, and was bringing it metaphorically up from being a child to, oh, you can be a part of my team, and now we're gonna walk forward and have a voice, a stronger voice, right?
Mhm.
Because I'm willing to stand up for myself. It wasn't up to my husband to stand up for me. It wasn't up to my kids to stand up for me. It was up to me. Now, I called in my dragon. I called in, I actually had a guide that came in. Somebody else's guide kind of hitchhiked and helped me out, Sabrina. There was all these different parts that were coming forward to help me, so that when I started getting into victimhood again, energetically in the middle of the conversation, and tears started to come up, I heard the word breathe, ground,
Mm.
breathe. Those were the simple words. And I went, hmm. And I come back into realization, awarenesses, that kind of thing. And so things that are in front of us are here to help stretch and pull us so we can get into a new knowing. So now in the fair this weekend, I came up to someone who was testing me in a reading. She was challenged energetically during the reading. I'm like going, is this coyote working with me? That trickster. I'm going to
Mhm.
tease her here. I'm going to tease her there. Going to lead her here. I'm going to lead her there to see if I'm the one leading thoughts into her, or if it's her intuitiveness, right? Well, during that part, I was like instead of becoming victim of it, I practiced already standing up to the bully energy, to stand up to this trickster bully energy, to negotiate what I'm doing. So, usually if you're negotiating something, the universe is going to give you another chance to work on it to make sure you got it a little bit
Yeah.
better. It's
Well,
it's a journey, a little bit better, right?
yeah. Well, in the research that we've done through the Newton Institute, of which we've had 70,000 people now in a deep state of trance, we've helped them to visit the afterlife for a few hours and learn some things and come back, like having a near-death experience without the death part, and that's what I do with people. Um, what we found out is that the majority of times when you come down to be reincarnated body, it's to learn something. In
Mhm.
other words, it's like us taking classes in college. We want to learn something, go to trade school, we want to go to college because there's some skill that we don't have that we want to have. And so people choose difficult lives. They choose to come down and to go through these hurdles, to have to go through, break through these barriers and things like that. Even soulmates sometimes. We had a case recently where the woman, when she's in a deep state of trance and she talks to the higher self of her current husband, and one of the questions she was asking him is, "Why are we having such a difficult time?" I said, "We're soulmates. Why does it feel like you're pushing me so much? Why does it feel like you're challenging me so much? Why can't we just, we love each other so much. Why can't we just get along?" And he says to her from, in heaven, she's up there. And he says, "Well, hey, honey, that's, I love you so much. Remember, we decided I was going to come down because I love you so much. And I was going to be like divine sandpaper with you, you know, to wear you down in some way so that you could change for the better,
Mhm.
And so her just having that knowledge changed the whole situation with her. Now, she's willing to, when her husband uh seems to be bullying her or something like
Yeah,
that.
being a little bristly.
Right. Dude, she's now beginning to start to do what you just described. In
Yeah.
other words, instead of trying to slay the messenger, who's just there to give you, to try to help wake you up, you know, try to find out what is it that she needs to learn from that challenge that she's having with her husband. So once you see, it's kind of like a game a little bit, and then you just like, have you seen sometimes kids when they're playing like Scrabble or Monopoly or something like that, when they haven't matured yet and they take the game too seriously, they lose their temper and they throw things, and you can't as you get older and you realize it's just a game, you don't do that kind of thing, once you mature, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of times that's what we need to do. Instead of complaining about things, we need to be mature enough to say, like, that was so cool what you said about the bully. Instead of just reacting back to the bully, you're realizing that she just triggered something in you that you needed to look at, you
Mhm.
know.
Now,
Uh,
I'm gonna tell you, for the first, 12 hours, I sat in victimhood.
oh, okay.
I did sit in victimhood. I did sit in, why is this happening? Why are they doing this to me? Now, I can say though that my victimhood might feel a little different than others because I'm asking those questions. What is this about? Why are they so worried about 2 minutes when the big picture of life was I was taking care of a big situation? Why what is this doesn't compute. Where am I doing what they're saying I'm doing? It's like
Yeah.
there's a lot of miscommunication, perceptions were off. It was just a kerfuffle, kind of
Yeah.
thing, and I couldn't put it in a box. And so that kind of held me in victimhood a little bit,
Yeah.
because I was like, what is it about me? I don't fit in a box. Do they want to get rid of me? Do they, it's like, sometimes how they push people out of jobs, you know, because
Hmm.
they just don't fit in a box anymore, type of thing. But the union, you can't really necessarily fire anybody, so they push you to leave,
Hmm.
kind of thing. And so with that, I was checking in with it. But once I got my feet back underneath me, and that's the thing that I have learned. Sometimes we have to be where we're at. If you're angry about something, if you're sad about something, if you don't like something, deal with it. But what I did was I didn't go yell and scream at my bosses. There was a
Yeah.
couple opportunities that I could have said something, but looking back, that part of me said, "Why didn't you say something? You should have said something then." Arr!" But then I was saying, "No, wait a minute," because I would have been heard wrong.
Yeah.
People would have gotten defensive instead of interactive.
Yeah.
And then that way also too, when you're dealing with someone who you don't fit in their box, sometimes when you give them more information, they know how to manipulate you unconsciously.
Yeah.
So I had to be neutral for a little bit. And sometimes neutrality is not a bad thing, especially when you don't have all the perceptional pictures.
Yeah.
you know Two sides to every coin. There's two knowings to everything. There's so looking and stretching at things. So welcome those that are watching. If you have any comments, please say something, because this is a conversation, and please like and share, and do what you can do to. I really feel like this is a conversation that a lot of people can be helped with. And so if you'd like to make a comment about what's happening, please do so, because this is a good conversation.
Yeah. If they're watching on YouTube, they can do that, right? Just
Mhm.
type in a
And
comment.
Facebook. Hmm.
Well, see, now I'm glad you brought up this. It was great how you said, did it, for the first hours, you were in victimhood a little bit, because even with us, with the knowledge and everything we have and what to do, being human beings, it's normal to be in victimhood for some amount of time. But
Hmm.
as you become more spiritually aware of the bigger picture, you're going to find out that the amount of time you spend in victimhood becomes less and less and less. I know when I
Exactly.
look back how I was 5 years ago, or 1 year ago, or 6 months ago, even, it seems like I get back up on the wagon and move forward, quicker than I used to get out of the victim mode. Because, yeah, we want to feel like a victim, like, ouch, for a little while. But then in that time, when you were feeling that way, because you have a bigger sense of things, that's when your higher self started working on this issue, right?
Mhm.
And started thinking, maybe I shouldn't react over this, because this could be this way. Why do I feel this way when that person, said those kind of things? What do I need to look at within myself, and we're not saying that we're excusing rude behavior from people, or that sort of thing, but we're just saying it's kind of good to see the whole 360 degrees of an issue rather than just a little tiny part, you know?
Exactly, because perception can mess us up, and that's the
Yeah,
thing that at first, when it first happened to me, I was in shock. You know,
yeah.
this really happened? Really? Okay. And then the disbelief turned into frustration and anger and the word bully and all that labeled energy. And then as time went on, I had to go, okay, I really try right away taking the person out of the experience.
Mhm.
Um and you know taking that I try to take the person out of the experience and make the experience the interaction. So I had the feeling and I witnessed being bullied. I'm not labeling who that is because they have their own scenario,
Yeah.
right? They're a human being. They're doing that. And then coming forward again, I really worked on how can I negotiate these feelings of being bullied because it's my response to what happened that I'm actually responsible for, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's one of those things. So, hello there. Is it Monica?
Monica, had
Yeah.
to look over there.
I'm glad I talked about since we've been have others in power positions that over abuse their power. Yes, we do, and welcome to our show. And we do. That's where though, if we take the person out of the position and negotiate what's happening, the scenario that's happening, then our intentions change, which means our empowerment changes. Because if we're trying to stand up to another person, we have to meet that person where they're at. But if we're actually interacting with a situation, we can maneuver around that person, right? Because we see a different perspective. Because
Yeah.
if we're just labeling that person's perspective, then we forget that there's a lot of other scenarios going on, right? And we
Yeah.
need to negotiate that. Because I know that in my situation there is people that are involved, right? And I do have to do something to dot my i's and cross my t's about the person, but I'm not necessarily trying to my intention is not to call out. I'm talking about representation of what happened, if
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in other words, they walked across the street crooked. Instead of labeling it so and so walked across, it's like, well, my supervisor walked across the street crooked, and that's what I've been getting in trouble for. So do as I say, not as I do. And so how do you intentionally talk about that without going, "Eh, nah, 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 nah," the same thing that they're doing to us? Because
Yeah.
if we're bullying them back, are we any better than them? And it's not about right or wrong, and it's not about being better than them.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
how do we shift that energy so that we can be more cohesive?
I had a spiritual experience that happened that has helped me deal with bullies. Happened when I was, I think, in my mid 40s. So it's about 30 years ago. And I think I mentioned it one other time on the program, but I was at a chiropractor and he was doing the network chiropractic on me, which was a new type of chiropractic where they don't actually physically even touch you,
Mhm.
but you lay there. And what they do is they go over your body, the energies, they find the hot and cold spots. And when they find a cold spot, they know that there's something stuck there or some kind of
Mhm.
energy. And this man was a friend of mine. So even though it was kind of weird, and I kind of like to feel like to feel when they physically manipulate me. I said, okay, I'm open to this because he just got back from the schooling from that. So I laid on my stomach and I could just, I don't know, I could maybe kind of feel him in my energy a little bit, where his hand, I could feel the warmth or something of his hands. But all of a sudden I I was standing in a schoolyard, like seemed like it was like 1800s. And what seemed real to me, like I wasn't making it up in my mind because my mind's kind of looking at what's going on at the same time I'm having this experience.
Mhm.
But it was a fence about 2.5 feet tall, but it was unpainted. It was like to give the border of like a schoolyard. And when I looked at the schoolhouse, there was space between the boards. You could see through, so it was, and it wasn't painted. It was just roughly thrown together. And I was standing there, and a little girl in a little dress, I can picture her now, in a little dress down to her knees. She came up to me. When she looked up at me, because I'm the big kid in the schoolyard. She looked at me, and she saw me, and she screamed like I'm some sort of monster and ran away. And I realized at that time that I'm the school bully. I'm this big brute guy that just, everybody's afraid of and everything like that. But instantly I knew why I was the bully. And it's like I could feel in that body. And I was feeling like I had no love in my life. I had no love, and I was bitter about that. So I was mean to everybody. And then it fast forwarded. I feel like I'm in my mid 40s. I'm kind of a rotund kind of guy. I'm in this little cabin about maybe 12 feet by 20 feet. I can see the cabin now in my mind. And I'm just feeling that same feeling I had when I was a kid, that I just don't have any love. I just felt sad. I felt like, what's the worth living? And I saw my hand reach up and grab a rope off a hook that I had there. And I went into the woods, and I felt me put the rope around my neck. And then all of a sudden I was out of it, and I've always realized since that day, that bullies, it's like you almost you gotta give them a hug somehow, even an energetic hug, or send love to them or something, because they're so mean and everything a lot of times, because they have lives that they feel that they're totally victimized, that they don't have any love, that they don't have any good within themselves, So it gave me a whole perspective on bullies. And so now when I see bullies, something in me, in a sense, I just feel sad, like, oh, poor, person, instead of feeling angry. That doesn't mean that I don't, get angry back sometimes, but.
And that's why I try to take the person out of the situation, even though there's a person doing it. Even though there's a person doing it, but I try to analyze it and look at that situation. I try to take the people out of it and see what's going on. Oh, that bullying is my thing I got to deal with. Now, their representation of it, because they're so hurt and out of control that they try to be in control, which makes them bully, in a sense of, because they want to control everything. So they're going to be bulldozers about what they want, right?
Yeah.
Which is a bully attitude. And so, looking at where we're at in life, that many times it is, the other person that's struggling with this, because everybody has a thing.
Yeah.
Everybody has a story. Everybody has trauma that happened to them. Everybody has something that wasn't comfortable happen to them. How do we negotiate it and, in a way, honor what's going on with them, and that's where, if we can take judgment out of it, say, not going to happen again, like what's happening in the scenario I explained earlier. Now I know better. I have better tools. So when I see a scenario happening again that reminds me of what happened this time with feeling bullied, I'm going to communicate earlier. I'm going to put up different boundaries earlier, so that I don't negotiate that the same way I did by waiting for things to happen. I have better tools now to go forward. And so, and yes, it can be a bottomless pit, trying to negotiate this whole story. But I can tell you, though, that me going through what I did, so when I sat down with union representation, because I wanted to have that, protection there, right?
Mm-hmm.
That when I sat down with that, that I actually had a more engaging conversation, more empowered situation, instead of trying to backlash and be all over the place and not be secure. I was with myself. I understood who I needed to be in that situation, which made me stronger, which made that other person respect me differently.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes the situations that we have to deal with are karmic involved. In other words, it's just, we put someone in the same situation another lifetime, and now we're here having to have the same thing happen to us. So it's like sometimes you sign up for situations. Sometimes it has to do with, payback or karma, and sometimes it's just lessons that you want to learn. That you want to. Like some people are prepared to go to grad school, and some people just want to get their degree and leave. Other people go to grad school and then they do their doctorate and go, even beyond that, spend more years learning. So everybody's a little bit different. I always look at it like that. Like, when I'm in the middle of a difficult situation, and I think, okay, Regan, okay, if it is true that I signed up for this, why am I going through that? And just the fact that I say that to myself lessens the degree of difficulty in a
Mhm.
situation. So just saying that and coming to that instead of just reacting,
Mhm.
like you said, when that thing happened to you, instead of just reacting immediately, you let it. You had to filter through it. You had to think about it and look at it in different situations so that your response was going to be responsible and coming more from love rather than dysfunction. You
Yeah,
know,
and I'm gonna tell you, love can be tough love.
yeah,
It's not wishy-washy. It's got tough love. And Monica, here's some narcissists select their targets, and it's a huge decision. Yes, and that there again is hatred gets in there. Dislike. I mean, I gotta tell you that my husband, when he was drinking, he was narcissistically attitude. And I lived over 20 years with that energy, and it's not easy to negotiate it. It's very, you become more passive aggressive yourself sometimes. But at the same time, though, what can we learn about boundaries? What can we learn about discernment? What do I need to do to survive this? What do I need to negotiate this? Um, I sure learned how to stand in my own empowerment all those years with mine. You
yeah,
know that there was a reason why. There was a reason why my husband at that time, now he's, oh my gosh, he's becoming a miracle. He's a recovering narcissist. Is there a thing? He's a recovering narcissist. that you
I
know
don't know.
that but it takes us having boundaries. No, this isn't going to work anymore, and if we have to walk out, we have to walk out. So we can discern how much we want to step into somebody who we know is a narcissist. Sometimes they trap us, but how can we get untrapped with that, right? So, becoming who we are and doing our dance, we're going to come up with the things we don't like. Come up with the situations that we don't like. But I'm going to tell you, though, that a lot of times, and I've come up with a lot of situations. I had a supervisor that there was two supervisors, one that I was working under and one that was put into our network because we had too many students, right? And this is one that nobody really liked her. She was all about her, lovingly said. I ended up working with her, and because I knew how to negotiate the situation more than her. Does that make sense? So that when
Yeah,
I took the power out of her, it gave me the power to be negotiate what was in front of me. So
yeah,
if the situation was control, how can I help with that control situation? If the situation was shame or throwing off guilt to people around us, then we had to do that. If it was victimhood, how can I help with victimhood? Because the person's going to show you different faces, right? But how can you negotiate those faces and detach from it? Because things are in our life to trigger us, to heal us. So if we don't like how a situation is going down, the news example, there's a lot of things we don't like. We can either feed into it, give it power, or we can detach from it and say, I'm asking for divine healing on this. I want things to happen. The next time I see something that's going on like this, I'm going to stand up for it. But you have to kind of get detached from the story and become empowered being in the moment of it. Do you hear the difference with that? Getting out of the story of it, which we can stay there for a few minutes while we're negotiating those emotions. but get out of the story if you can and get into how can I negotiate it?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of learning. Like when I was a professional clown for a lot of years, which is seems like another lifetime now. Back for about 20 years, I mean, I did like 4,000 children's birthday parties, and then I had the opportunity to start to expand, and I started buying those inflatable things that kids jump on and slide on, and what all that. End up spending about $100,000 on those things, and started renting them out. Besides, being a clown or anything. Well, that business, it started. I started doing grad nights where I had like sumo wrestling and these big giant boxing rings so that seniors could get in there and pound themselves with these big giant boxing gloves, and Velcro
Mhm.
walls where they would run and jump and have the Velcro, so they run and jump and stick on a wall, Velcro, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And uh, it ended up being, like I didn't know what I was getting into. There was so much pressure with that, with things breaking, people getting hurt, having to have train, teenagers that work for me, and having to have them show up on time, and having to buy more vehicles so they could, because I couldn't do all the jobs myself and everything. And it at one point, it was so much pressure I was going through. My wife actually left the house. She told us, we had the 4 daughters there. She says to the daughters, and it says, there's so much pressure he's under right now. I can't stand just being around him. And so she went to a motel for the weekend because there was so much pressure going on, and it was just too crazy. And I'm thinking at the time, it's like, man, what did I sign up for here? But those 6 or 7 years that I did that, when I looked back after the situation, I went, man, I feel I could deal with any stress that comes along now, because I learned I had to deal with it. I was thrown in it. It was hard, but I found solutions. I worked my way through it, and I became stronger because of it.
Mhm.
So and when it was all said and done, I was glad that I went through those 6 years of craziness, because it made me a stronger, better, it made me a better boss, to deal with people. It made me deal with, I learned how to deal with situations. I had to, sometimes when someone would get hurt on something and I'd get sued or something, I had to learn how to deal with all the, legalities and all that situation, and how to have compassion for the people, not how to not try to duck out of my responsibility. Although I
Mhm.
can see where that comes from, because you just want to run from that and try to make it look like it's not your fault. Oh God, I learned so many things.
But sometimes it's not because it was somebody else's stupidity
Yeah,
sometimes, but it was your equipment. But it's that tricky place. Sometimes it is a tricky place. Like I had the mantra lately, I didn't do anything wrong, but I can shift something. I didn't do anything wrong, but I can shift something. And
yeah,
so to make it feel more right. And when we're dealing with, like you were saying, that you didn't like the situation you're in, but you kind of got into the domino effect of it, right? One
yeah.
thing led to another. And then you finally put the brake on and said, let me look at this for a second. And
Right,
that's the thing is that a lot of times we start getting into these stressful moments of I don't like this and I don't like that and right? And then how do we negotiate, but we have to sometimes stop. And that's one thing that I noticed, like what I just went through lately, that I had to stop once in a while and breathe and just take an overall view. It's almost like, the umbrella life, and then you look what's underneath the umbrella.
yeah,
Oh, okay. And you get different perspectives. Look at it from the north, south, east, and west, looking into it to see how you can negotiate these things because things aren't always as they appear.
yeah,
You know, if we don't like something, something, let's say something on the news, we don't like something and it really stirs a part of us. Remember, we got to look back and see why we're being triggered ourselves.
right. And sometimes people that come to me, they come to me for regular therapy, because they have these difficult issues they're having to deal with, and we try to find out where it all started, and
Mhm.
we go back. Sometimes in hypnosis, I'll do a regression where they go back to early childhood and try to see if they can find out where situations started. Sometimes we come up with nothing, and then we'll do a past. If they're open to it, we'll do a past life regression, And lo and behold, they find out that something that they carried over from another lifetime has actually caused them some issues in this lifetime.
Mhm.
Then when they and the beautiful thing about that is when they see that and they find out where it started and have that understanding of why, where it started from and why they have that issue, sometimes their issue just disappears.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just having that like that awareness. So that's one benefit. Sometimes people say, well, what's the big deal about doing a past life regression? Because I'm who I am now. I'm not who I was then. But think of in this lifetime, and you think of when I think about the different, like I feel like I've been five different me's in this lifetime. When I think about different stages, as you become more mature, as you deal with
Mhm.
issues and problems, you become more spiritually aware, like initiations in a way, and in each of those other times, I was a different personality. I reacted to things differently than I do now,
Mhm.
so it's all these things that we go through. The things that I've been through, especially like relationships, have helped. The 6 women that have been special in my life, each one of them seemed to have a mission to wake me up in a certain way. It's like boom, 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 boom. You know, and I think back to like angels. They had the patience to deal with my stubbornness and my the things. But here I am now, a lot better person than I used to be.
Mhm. And
So
it and that's the thing is that we get stuck in these moments of story of I don't like this, I don't like that. Why is this happening? Why is that happening? Why did corporate have to buy out my nice little store? Why is it that there's so much going on in the news? I really hate that. Why am I feeling this way about this situation? And I can tell you that me going through my I'm going to label it feeling bullied. It goes back many generations, many generations in my DNA and many generations of my past lives. And this was an opportunity for my soul to say, ah, ah, excuse me, I'm here, and I'm not the perception you thought I was. I'm here, and I'm not the perception you thought I was.
yeah,
And that's the thing is that's why like calling out the narcissist, right? Like Monica, I hope I'm saying your name right, that you called out the narcissist. Well, sometimes we got to deal with the narcissist, but we cannot do it without support. you know
yeah,
you have to be able to, like for me, I called in somebody to listen to our conversation, not because I want to prove that that other person was wrong, but I wanted to make sure that I was doing okay too. Because it is a triangle. You know, not everybody's right and not everybody's wrong.
yeah.
There's two sides to every coin, and we're not perfect, nor is the other person. So how can we negotiate this a little bit better?
I recently, I wish I could remember all the things I learned somehow, but it was like on Google, and you type in how do you deal with a narcissist? How do you stand up to a narcissist? And there's big warnings to start with saying you watch out, what you're really in for something, because if you go up against a good narcissist, and they can always find a way to come out on top, because that's what they're professional at, you know,
Hmm.
to gaslight you, to make it look, turn it back around, that it's you're the problem rather than them,
Hmm.
And I forget what it was at the day when I learned that, but there's a couple websites on there that says if you're living with a narcissist, type in how do you deal with a narcissist, and they give you some hints on there and what you can do to, you know, but they said, you know, even though you try to deal with them, you're more likely to end up on the bottom still, because that's what narcissists do.
Exactly. And that's the thing is like I did a speech, and you can find it on my Facebook page, that I did a speech this weekend at the Intuitive Fair, and I was talking about dealing with emotions. And one person asked, well, what do you do with people who are doing things to you? And I said, for one, it's not our job to fix them.
Yeah,
It's not our job to influence them. Like my husband says, Natasha, you taught me so much. I said, "You don't even like to listen to me half the time. How am I supposed to?" He goes, "You showed me." And so the best way to negotiate a lot of these stories is to do it in spite of. Be
Mhm.
ourselves in spite of the narcissist, you know? Um, don't try to prove them wrong, but yet at the same time, be your truth of rightness.
Yeah.
Be it. Sometimes we try to use words and words just flitter off and they cause trouble.
Well,
Many times we have to come back to being and breathing to be able to do it. There's a bigger statement sometimes saying, and walking out the door
yeah.
and not saying a word, right? Because when you go, mm, and walk out the door, they can't say, well, you just called me an F and blah, 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 blah. Oh, shumba, they walked out the door. They're mad at me now. Oh,
Yeah.
then their stories start bonking around in their brain, right?
Mhm.
Oh,
There's
good,
a
I'm right.
missionary.
And then that evolution of I'm right kind of starts waning a little bit because they have their own story in their own head, right? And
Yeah.
narcissists have so much going off in their heads. And narcissists are very poor believers in themselves.
Yeah.
And so when they're by themselves, you can imagine the story that's going off in their heads because they have to make sure that we're the one that's bad. So when you leave them by themselves, I'm going to tell you that a lot of times that's that's more of a punishment than you sitting there
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So you said, okay. So she said, I thank you for making comments. I appreciate that. So if anybody wants to make a comment, please, because this is a conversation, please make them kind comments. So because we're trying
Yeah,
to do better
trauma
here.
activators is
Yeah,
right. They're
they are drama activists as
yeah.
well. Yes, they are. Totally. You've had experience with one. So there again, though, the more that we feed the drama, the hatred, the story, the victimhood, in ourselves included, the more power it has. So if you can, that's why I use the mantra, what is this here to teach me? And sometimes I say it as quickly as, well, what is this here to teach me? What is this here to teach me? What is this here to teach me? There's something here to see. What am I seeing? What am I need to be seeing? Because I want to stay out of my own brain's rabbit hole.
Yeah.
That's a legal way of saying it, right? you know, and because I'm human, I have emotions. I have all these things that go forward. And like the other night when I was like on the third night of barely sleeping, I was sitting here going, I'm a very much of an imagery person. So I was sitting here going, do I have an attachment? Of energy. Did I have an attachment of energy? Because the scenario was circling around too many times for
Yeah.
me, right? I was in hatred too much. And so what I ended up doing was, do I have an entity on me? I have an entity of this situation, an energy of the situation that happened to me, of being painful, of being achy. And so I asked that part of me to go into I'm asking for divine healing on this section, right? And then I took tongs and started plucking the repeating stories out of my head. I would go into the tissue and metaphorically, I'm very logical about how I do things, right? But what I found though, the next morning I was breathing a little bit better because I decided to do something different with my story.
Yeah.
I didn't want to stay in the story anymore, because I wanted to move past it to healing, to acknowledgement, to why, to how to's, to whatever the dance was that I was going to do.
Yeah. We talk about relationships as probably the biggest thing that it's usually where we have our major classes. If you figure like a college that we're going through, relationships, especially like best friends or husband wife kind of things, where we seem to have our biggest hurdles or our biggest learning and everything. And that is illustrated so much in Married at First Sight. We've talked about that before, where that people haven't seen the show. relationship experts try to match people, and they have, for the first time, people meet on the they're married. I mean, they
Mhm.
walk down the aisle, and the first time they see each other is like walking down the aisle, and
Yep.
they've agreed to be married, and they're married for 8 weeks, and in that 8 weeks they get to decide, do they want to stay married or get a divorce. Now, over the years, probably 70% have got divorces. Okay.
Mhm.
But in the thing that's really wonderful to watch, and me as a therapist, but just this is about human nature, to watch these programs, is to watch from the beginning of the honeymoon night, where they're first starting to get to know each other, and what happens in that 8 weeks. And if you, every one of them, if you see them at the beginning of the 8 weeks, at the end of the 8 weeks, even though a lot of them end up in divorce, they are forever changed. You know,
Mhm.
they've learned so much. Some of them have, for the first time, had to deal with issues that they've never had to deal with before about their own selves, because here's this other person now that has issues with the way they are, and they have to feel, how do I change? What do I do? So it's really wonderful to see. And most of them afterwards will say, even though we got a divorce, I'm so glad I went through the process, because now I know, I really know more about myself, and they learn
Mhm.
so much in a crash course. It's just, it's really falls apart sometimes when people have to, you know, learn about themselves that quickly.
Well,
Um,
and we learn so much. Can you imagine now, because these shows would come out, what, 6 months later or so, and you see yourself on video. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is drama, so they cut out a lot. They cut
yeah,
out, they make things manipulate.
they
They
do.
they like the drama, so they're going to plop in drama instead of a good conversation. So, but the backstory, and how you get presented. Oh, I didn't listen very well, did I?
Yeah,
Oh, well, if we can take that perspective of, hmm, but it's not like I didn't do it, hitting yourself, that it's not about the hitting yourself, but it's like, now, since I didn't listen very good at the very beginning, I wasn't vulnerable enough at the very beginning that I was at the end, that maybe I can do that with my next relationship.
right. And a lot of them, they talk to them years later after the show, and what they learned from the show really helped them in their next relationships, where they have, some of them gotten married since, or have,
Hmm.
successful relationships. So, um, you know, it's uh, it's just difficult. Like, I have a couple of friends I would consider really, really close friends, and I think with both of us, it's like they're not the kind of friends that you could like live with,
Hmm.
because they have too many issues that you just don't want to be involved in, but they're still good friends. And
Hmm.
that's what's nice about having good friends, because you can be with them, and then, okay, I've seen them this year, and I'll come back to see them again 6 months or next year or something, and have a good time and really enjoy them. But if you think about, oh my gosh, like one of my friends is in a love relationship now, and I know so much about him that I'm going, oh boy, she doesn't know what she's getting into here. You
But
know?
that's her perspective, though, because I know that my best friend, I wouldn't wanna marry her husband, nor would she wanna marry mine.
Right. Yeah, yeah,
Because we can only live with what we want to live with,
yeah.
what we can put up with, what we're gonna negotiate. But I can tell you that in my 32 years of marriage, 33 now, I was married in 91. So, you know, in those many years of marriage, I can tell you there was plenty of things that my husband did I did not like. And actually I had to use a serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity, right?
Yeah.
And I had a discussion, I had the discussion with him even, because one night I was waking up listening to the serenity prayer, and then and then the statement came out, and I know this is not how it goes. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the wisdom to know if I can live with it or
Oh,
not.
yeah.
So
Yeah, 'cause
there's things in everybody, things in a grocery store, things in our cars that we just don't want to live, or that we don't like. We hate them, but can we live with them?
yeah,
And that's the choice that we got to deal with when we're dealing with relationships and bosses and stuff like that, is, can I live with it? Sometimes I have to say, I can live with it for right now. And then this is what a mantra that I've been using lately is I surrender, trust, and accept because I don't have all the information.
Yeah.
I surrender, trust, and accept because I don't have all the information yet.
I like that.
You know, so do the steps, do the things to learn. We're coming up to the last of our hour here. So if you're struggling with things that you don't like, take a moment to breathe, understand that victimhood, hurt, shame, hatred, grief, whatever is going to come to you, acknowledge it, be with it, but it also acknowledge that there is a reason why things are happening. So ask the question, why is this triggering me? Why is it? Hi, Paula. Why is this triggering me? Ask that question before you move on. Why is this person in that form triggering me?
Yeah.
Because sometimes that person can be a representation of like your boss can have the same sound that an aunt had that abused you, and you don't know why you hate them, but then there's your subconscious remembers. So check into, there's a reason, and remember boundaries. We can always step away from people, right? We can always step away from situations, and that process, right? Hi, Paula. And then she says, grief is an issue for me. Yes, grief is a big issue
It's
right
funny.
now for a lot of people. I'm losing a community. Yes, and we are, that's called evolution. And I can tell you, I've had an ebb and flow of, I've spent now my 57 years of life that that I think in the last 5 years is the most community I've ever had. But
Yeah.
even in that community of the last 5 years, because I could tell you I was an only child and nobody on my block when I was growing up. And I had cousins who lived a half an hour away. So I
So
mean, I didn't have people, but yet I had to get out of my comfort zone to get my newer community, and they'll come.
I wonder if she's how she's losing community. Is she moving or it's funny because just before she said that, my next sentence I was going to say is we need to do another show on grief, on how to handle grief because my I have a relative of mine. They've been trying to have a child for 14 years, and she finally got pregnant. And it was everybody in the family was just so excited and everything. And she had the baby a few weeks ago, and then they're holding the baby, and the baby just died. So it's like, oh, so they had to give the baby up, and it was just our whole family is just in mourning right now because we were so happy for them. They just would be great parents. They've tried for so many years. Finally, here the baby comes, and then the baby's born and dies. It's just like, wow, that's a very difficult thing to deal with. So part of me wants to jump in there, try to do something, but I know I need to let them grieve and let them, uh,
Give them a
do what they
hug
have to do, and
of
later
energy of
point, I can
love.
maybe
Yeah.
help, yeah. But I know too, it's just like, look at all the lessons. I'm just thinking, what am I learning even from that? Because I feel this emotion and sadness and feel like crying sometimes when I think about that. And so, it's like situations we have, they impact other people, the other people feel our sadnesses and then they have to deal with their sadnesses and grief over our grief,
Hmm.
and that. So it's very, very difficult.
Yes, and that's where, I've gone through the grief process. I've not lost a husband, I have not lost a child. I've witnessed many people. I had a mother of heart. My mom passed away, and then a woman came into my life, and I called her my mother of heart. I witnessed her for over 20 years grieving the loss of her child. So I've kind of gotten it through osmosis, and I've had a past life a couple times where I've lost children, so I go there to get the emotion. But
Hmm.
it's that grief is something, and I so am called to help people through that moment, to honor themselves. And we've talked about how to work through the hate. Oh my gosh, talk about hatred when we're in grief.
You're right.
You know, hatred is in grief. And how can we negotiate that? Monica said that grief is changing in our community, and it can be taboo, and it hits deep. Oh, it's you have depression of grief, and then you can be depressed in grief. So there's a lot of different facets to grief, and maybe next week let's talk about grief. I
Yeah.
think that would be
We did a couple times last year, but it's been a while, and we have
it's
new
been a
audience now
while,
and
and
everything too.
I think it's a calling, because a lot of people are losing community.
Yeah.
They're losing a lot of things. They're losing their jobs. They're losing family members, and when we're losing, it is a grief moment. And I know that a lot of people are choosing to leave this planet right now too. So there's a big doorway of people leaving, and it'll be this way until October, just on the other side of November. So it's going to be a little while for us losing people. So
Yeah.
my love goes to everyone. It's just, grief is not an easy thing. So if you're losing your community, remember, it's like sometimes we're like a butterfly. We have to go into our cocoon to find out who we are so we can call in a new community. But I'm also telling you, if you're losing your community, figure out how to do things a little different. If you're shifting up who you are, go to a community that's shifting up themselves.
Yeah.
Go into a community. You'll come here. This is a community every Monday and Wednesday. Find your community somehow. And I understand and respect physicality. Go to go to who you need to be with, and find your community. Sometimes you have to go to classes. Start finding, a group that you can do a class with, and then you find friends in that class, and then start finding your community again.
Yeah.
And I'm not labeling that it has to be about spiritual group. I'm just labeling, if you're an artist, go to an artist class, find people who you can be friends with. Whatever the thing that you want to find community in, move that way. So I'm glad I saw you at the Intuitive Fair, Arts Fair. Me too. That was a blessing. I'm so grateful that you were there too, and thank you for sharing your story with me. I was
Yeah,
so
I have
grateful for
another
that.
fair, an intuitive or not intuitive fair, well, psychic fair. So same thing coming up on, I think it's July 29th. I'll be doing another one, just a 1-day fair. So I
Yeah,
love doing that because
down
there's
in
so many
California.
like-minded people. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I'm I think I've done 10 or 11 sessions in the last month and a half from the other fair that I did. So it's kept me pretty busy.
Hmm.
So people, I guess, gosh, we're over time, but yeah, we can talk about loss of community, which is a form of grief. Grief is not just when somebody dies. It can be, losing a relationship or a friendship
Community, yeah,
or
it's in faceted in
community.
everything.
When we
Yes,
grieve.
and so Monica, where he lives down in California, so it's down in the San Francisco area. I know for me, in the middle of July, I'll be up in Bellingham at the Spiritual for Living fair up there. So that'll be fun. Yeah, so we're at the 5 o'clock time.
I know. I have in-laws that are here. They were here seeing my niece and her child, and they just happened to be here for our engagement party that we had. So it was great. We just said nice, a perfect natural. We had some family from back east coming out,
Oh,
so
cool.
they're going to come over for eat leftovers from the that we had from the Saturday party tonight. So we're having because we had salmon and we had a salmon dish, and then we had chicken marsala, were the two dishes people could choose from. And
Yum.
we had appetizers, and we had a beautiful engagement cake afterwards. It was really great. So they're going to be
Oh, I
here.
know your parties. I was there one time when I was down in California,
Yeah.
and
Well, we have to,
it's
yeah,
a
we have
it's
to,
a
the next time
shingding.
you come, like if it's next year, have to schedule it around when we're having the family dinner. So it'd be great. So if
Yeah.
people want to get a hold of me, it's visittheafterlife.com. I'm certified with the Newton Institute, and what I do is I help my clients get into a deep state of trance, which most people can reach. And in that state, you actually expand your awareness to the afterlife. So you get to spend a couple hours in the afterlife. Sounds crazy, but we've had 70,000 people do it, and it's a new thing. And you can get a lot of get questions answered that you pre-prepare about your life and so forth. Visit loved ones that have passed on. Just imagine what you could do with having a guide over there, that you'll meet your guide, your angel. They'll take you around for a couple hours. It's really cool. Anyway, but I also do regular therapy, and all these sessions can be done on Zoom or they can be done in person. I go all over California, but if you're out of California, like I just did a session for someone in Philadelphia, someone in Missouri, last couple of weeks, and you'd be surprised that you can visit heaven over the internet, just like Natasha now. She could do readings for you just on Zoom or the internet, or even just with her, or even by the phone. So, she's got that ability, So if you need me, go to Visit the Afterlife. There's the way you can contact me on there, set up a Zoom session for regular therapy too. I deal with fears, phobias, post-traumatic stress. And then we have the spiritual side too, if you're open to that. So, and Natasha, now, if someone wants to have a session for you for either talking to a loved one that passed on, or something about their past lives, or something about their future, or even feng shuiing their house, how do they
Yes.
get a hold of you?
And I do house clearings and blessings too. So there's a lot of energy out there that
You
can
have a
be
lot
moved
of
around.
talent. That's good.
Yes, so you can reach me at angelicclarifications.com. I so love supporting people, and like today's mantra is, I'm loving my emotions, and because that's where we're going into, is a lot of emotions through this month of July. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about on Wednesdays, dealing with our emotions, which will be a little bit of grief involved with that too. But you can go to angelicclarifications.com. I would love to support anybody going through life's changes. And I do a lot of the DNA work. Right now, I have helped people, even on at the fair. I help people do a quick version of doing some DNA healing work. And I had perspectives where they've been doing DNA work and past life work, and they go, "Oh my gosh, I didn't have that perspective." Because I go into the threads of things many times, negotiating things. So I love to help people heal just as well as I like to heal myself.
Yeah.
So it's a dance and it's a story. How can we negotiate it? So I'm live on Wednesday at 4 o'clock Pacific time on the same stations everywhere. Even on Instagram, I think I will be on Wednesday. And then also, if you know of anybody who likes to listen to podcasts, please go to Life Clarifications with Natasha, and it's on most platforms. I'm also on other platforms. Just look for Natasha Venter AC. And Patty, thank you for being here. I am so grateful you're here. So real quick here, Patty. Patty's
Is
a
that my
very good
time?
friend of mine from Arizona.
Oh, Patty Black.
Um,
Oh, never Patty.
love the idea of sending love to a bully. Hard to react in a way that without
Yeah.
meditating on a situation. Practice small things, see how it changes in the bully's transpires.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
Patty,
And that
there's some, we don't have time for it now, but there's some stories about how when people started just doing like the Ho'oponopono we were talking about, where when you're in a situation with a bully, you say inwardly, "I love you, thank you, please forgive me, I'm sorry. I love you, thank you, please forgive me, I'm sorry." It covers all the bases of things. People have done that as a spiritual exercise, and they've watched other people's personalities change. So it's the
changes.
change within themselves that cause changes in other people.
Mhm.
Some beautiful stories that way.
And I
Um,
use the mantra, I'm asking for divine healing on this. And you don't even have to have any belief. Just even mentioning that can change the situation, because
yeah,
you've changed the thoughts of negative to, oh, it's out of my control.
yeah,
I'm asking for divine healing on this. Hands
yeah.
off.
Thanks, Patty. Yeah, Patty, tune in next, and we can converse more with you about your life and things next Monday,
Oh,
or
she's
Natasha on Wednesday.
whew, Patty has been amazing, and how she's had to survive and negotiate through
Oh,
grief.
You know her already.
I know her very well. She used to do hair with me when I was in a salon
Oh,
in Seattle. So we've known each other, what, 30 years, Patty? I think it is.
wow.
So she's a dear, 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 dear friend. So
Mm.
my love is with
All
everybody.
right,
See
everybody.
you next Monday at 4 o'clock Pacific time with Regan. And we'll be talking about grief on Wednesday. This Wednesday, I will be talking about emotions. So blessed be to everyone. Please like, share, and subscribe if you are there,
Yeah.
because we like to have the thumbs up. It helps us to get more views. So thank you to help people.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you next
Blessings to
week.
all. Bye now.